everyone. Welcome to Dsquare Talks, or Nerd Rages. I'm your host, of course, Dsquare. Today, I would like to cover a couple of topics that are pretty much related. I'd like to talk about the controversy with the Brie Larson, who is, of course, going to play Captain Marvel in the upcoming Captain Marvel movie. And then I'd like to morph into what the MCU should do to start the X-Men franchise inside the MCU. So let's talk about the Brie Larson controversy. Brie Larson is not somebody I knew about. I'm not really big into actors, and they're not even really on my radar unless they play somebody like in Star Wars or a comic book movie or Lord of the Rings. I mean, if you're not in that realm, I probably don't know a whole lot about you as an actor or actress. So Brie Larson, from what I understand, is a bit of a social justice warrior, which of course I really don't have any problem with anybody being. Be who you want to be and be happy. But the MCU has managed to steer clear of politics, at least on a major scale, and I think that's been the reason, or at least part of the reason, for its success. And so here's something you might not understand, Brie Larson, is I understand that you're not exactly looking for the adoration of a 40-year-old white guy like myself. I get that. I understand. But to put it out there and to make it blatantly clear that you really don't want us involved, or I'm paraphrasing here, you said you don't care about what works for a 40-year-old white guy. Here's something you may not understand, Miss Larson. And I say that because I want to show you as much respect as I possibly can here. 40-year-old comic book nerds are the last people on Earth that you have to lecture about social justice or discrimination, racism, things of that nature. You see, we've been reading about mutants and freaks and outcasts and exiles for, as you pointed out, 40 years. So we're not exactly the reason why these social injustices that have taken place over history, we're not the reason that happened. And in fact, we've been very accepting of those that are different from us for quite some time. Look at the words of the late great Stan Lee himself. He's basically our mentor. And again, just look at his quotes. I mean, I'm not gonna display them here, but again, last people on Earth that you need to lecture about diversity, women's rights. We've been down with that forever. We were ready, and probably still are, ready to celebrate the first major female superhero movie in the MCU, the same way that we celebrated Wonder Woman. Mind you, I have two daughters, and they're 2 and 4 years old. They know nothing about comic books, but do you know who they know? They know Wonder Woman, and they love her. So and again, all comic book nerds here, we're all for strong female characters. You don't have to worry about that. Here's what you do have to worry about, Brie Larson. Take me, for example. I was excited about your movie. Now, I hate the Captain Marvel character. Why do I hate the Captain Marvel character? Well, my first really dealings with the character, as many of you know, I'm an X-Men fan. So my first dealings with the character is when Rogue drained, at the time, Miss Marvel of all her powers, gained her powers permanently, and put her in the coma. They actually showed this in the 1990s X-Men animated series as well. So that's how I knew her. And other than that, she's been a bit of a nobody. Now, recently, they have rebooted the character somewhat, made her part of, I believe they're called the Ultimates, kind of a Avengers Space Force type deal. And the last major event that I remember her from was Civil War Part 2. And she was very unlikable. Very, very unlikable. I don't like the character whatsoever. Why didn't I like the character? Because in Civil War II, this is what happened. There was an Inhuman named Ulysses. His power was that he got visions of what could happen in the future. Now, in the beginning of Civil War II, it had not been determined yet what the accuracy of his visions were. So, Carol Danvers, of course, adopted the thinking, all of his visions are 100% true, and we need to act on them accordingly. This series starts off with the Avengers and the X-Men facing against this giant space being and defeating him. They were able to do this because Ulysses had a vision about this very same thing happening, and because of his vision, they were able to strategize and come up with a winning strategy. What else did Ulysses have visions about? Well, one, he had visions that the Incredible Hulk was going to rampage. Well, Carol Danvers wanted to act on that. So she went to confront the Hulk, and the Hulk started to get a little bit angry, and so the next thing you see is an arrow flying through Bruce Banner's head from Hawkeye. So of note, Hawkeye killed the Incredible Hulk. Well, Bruce Banner, but you get what I'm saying here. So, as a result of her blindly believing in Ulysses, the Incredible Hulk dies. At least Bruce Banner dies. Let's clarify. The next vision that she wanted to act upon was Ulysses had a vision that Miles Morales killed Captain America. I'm not ultra familiar with Miles Morales, but what I do know is that he would never do something like that. During this process, obviously Tony Stark is opposed to acting on these visions. And hence, that's where the Civil War comes from. It's Carol Danvers, a.k.a. Captain Marvel, and the people that stood behind her versus Iron Man, Tony Stark, and everyone that believed what he believed. Now, Beast and Tony Stark both were basically able to prove through comic book science fiction mumbo jumbo that Ulysses' visions were not 100% correct, and they were actually what may happen. And even after this revelation, Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, did the whole Batman v Superman Bruce Wayne thing, where, oh, there's a 1% chance we have to act on it, blah, 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 blah. Just a really jerk of a character during that series. So, to say that there's probably not a lot of people that was excited about the character, I'm sure that's a bit of a true statement. But now that the actor has gone out of her way to marginalize 40-year-old comic book white nerds like myself, is going to spell trouble for this movie. Because in my personal opinion, I was excited for this movie. I was excited because my daughters had yet another female superhero to look up to, and I also wanted to see the lead up to Endgame. And obviously I think Carol Danvers is going to play an important part in Endgame. But now, I'm not even going to see it. Basically, I've been told by the main actress that she doesn't want me to see it. So I'm going to oblige. What I want to learn leading up to Endgame, honestly, I can learn here on YouTube. There's plenty of people that do reviews and Easter eggs, all sorts of stuff. So I'm not going to really need to see the movie, so I won't. And why? It's because Brie Larson chose to be a social justice warrior who is, of course, exiling us 40-year-old white nerds, whom, by the way, are the reason she even has the opportunity to be in a comic book movie. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I think that it's okay to be a social justice warrior. I followed Chris Evans on Twitter for quite some time now, and he puts a lot on there about President Trump and all sorts of things. Okay, great. That's Twitter. Go for it. But, don't stand up on a podium and basically tell me I'm not welcome, because I'm going to get the hint. All right, guys. So would definitely like to read your comments down below. What do you think about this subject? The next subject I'm going to get into, of course, is still related to the Carol Danvers Miss Marvel / Captain Marvel. And that is, so what are my thoughts on how do we introduce the X-Men into the MCU? Perfect opportunity to do this, because I'm telling you right now, Marvel, Captain Marvel is not going to be a favorite character. So what you need to do, whether it be at the end of Endgame or some other movie, you need to have a confrontation between her and Rogue, and Rogue should take her powers and put her in the coma like she did in the Facebook. Because that's the Rogue that everybody loves. The one that flies around like Superman and smashes things like the Hulk. Oh, and can take other people's power temporarily. That's going to be the Rogue we want, not the bullcrap that we saw in the Fox movies. And that's a whole nother Nerd Rage episode in itself. I've got a lot to say about how Fox treated my X-Men, but I digress. So I think that you need to make the mutant threat the next big challenge for the Avengers. I'm talking about Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, who, of course, early on in her career, Rogue was a part of. So there you have it. Have an Avengers movie and introduce the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and then have Rogue tangle with Captain Marvel, take her powers, render her useless, put her in the coma, so you can put that character on the shelf. You can say, well, what about strong female characters? We want female characters. Okay, we're introducing the X-Men here, guys. The X-Men. Right now in the comics, the X-Men is led by a number of people, but right now the most prominent characters, the characters that are basically the leaders in the last biggest story arc of the X-Men, are Jean Grey, Kitty Pryde, Psylocke, and to a point Rogue. Rogue's actually doing her own thing on the Uncanny Avengers. Or there's also that Mr. and Mrs. X series where her and Gambit are gallivanting around doing their thing. So believe me, the X-Men have a plethora of strong, wonderful, smart female characters that we can all really enjoy. So, but I just talked about an Avengers movie. An Avengers movie where the Avengers deal with the threat of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. The X-Men movie itself, the first movie, should be like a Wonder Woman, Captain America, First Avenger type movie. What do I mean by that? Go back to the 60s, show how Charles Xavier and Magneto, Eric Lenscher, first meet and develop a relationship, show them kind of splitting apart, show Professor Xavier construct the original 5 X-Men, okay? Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Angel, and Beast. Have that movie focus, like I said, mostly on Xavier and Magneto, as well as Cyclops and Jean Grey, because obviously they are love interest, so that'll be a great way to get the females into the theaters. Have their final confrontation be with Magneto, solo. No Brotherhood of Evil Mutants yet, just Magneto. So that way, we kind of get a backstory on the new threat of the new Avengers trilogy, or what have you. Now, we've had our Avengers movie where they have a confrontation with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. We have our X-Men movie that showed you about Charles Xavier and Magneto and the 5 original X-Men. By the way, You can also throw scenes in that movie of Wolverine being turned into what we know of him today. You don't have to go into it. You don't have to spend a half hour of the movie. Just show us some Canadian guy go into the Weapon X program and then don't touch on it again. Because our next X-Men movie should then be the giant size X-Men. This is where you introduce the new X-Men team, the more popular X-Men team. And I'd like to see you do what you did in the comics, which is, hey, the original X-Men, they've been captured by the mutant living island Krakoa, so Charles Xavier has to develop this new team to go and save the old team. And then you could, after that movie, where you basically catch the X-Men up to the Avengers timeline where the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is a problem, you can explain that the X-Men have basically been in hiding for years, and that's why no one has heard of them. But now that Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants are making themselves a threat, now they have a reason to reveal themselves to the world. So you could do a crossover movie. I mean, sky's the limit. So Marvel, you can pull this off to be awesome. And I think you're quite lucky. I mean, the acquisition of Fox, I think, was actually pretty well timed, because the Avengers and all that was very, very popular. The MCU, of course, is very popular. But let's face it, in the last year, other than with the Avengers movie, I know I'm feeling a little bit of superhero fatigue. And that's me. I don't even like any other movies. Well, unless it's like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or something. But introducing the X-Men, that's going to get us excited again. The ultimate soap opera, now in the MCU hands. I've just given you the perfect way to introduce them into the MCU. I hope somebody over at Marvel, Kevin Feige himself, I don't know, I just hope somebody listens to this and understands how important the X-Men are and how they have to handle them. And they have to do it right. Don't give me some bull crap where the original team is Storm, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. No. Just for one movie, give me the 5 original X-Men and then go from there. All right, so what do you think? What do you think about my ideas about how to introduce the X-Men into the MCU? I think it would work out perfectly. I don't think you have to, stick to the source material 100%. In fact, the source material itself doesn't even stick to its own continuity. But definitely, I think there are details that you need to get right that will totally authenticate the X-Men in the MCU and make us fall in love with these movies again. Not that we're out of love, but it'll definitely stave off that superhero fatigue that's coming, guys. I mean, you just face it. We're not going to, at least your average moviegoer is not going to be interested in superhero movies forever. So you need to inject some new life. And now that you have the X-Men, you have the perfect opportunity to do that. Okay, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed my first edition of Dsquare Talks, or Nerd Rages. Didn't nerd rage a lot in this video, but I'm sure that there will be some nerd rage for you to experience in the future, especially when I talk to you about the Fox X-Men movies. There's some talking points there that I definitely would like to go over and explain where I think they really, really went wrong. And understand this is from a guy that, I understand you can't stick to the source material 100%, but there are definitely things that you don't need to change. So, all right, guys, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe if this is your first time coming across my content. I am a very, very small channel, so any sharing that you can do on your social media, I would absolutely, absolutely appreciate you for. Have a great day, everyone.